To all of God's chosen ones who've been led here, welcome. You didn't click on this video by chance. You were called. You were called because there is something stirring inside your spirit that refuses to be silenced. Something deep within you is searching, yearning, crying out for more. That hunger for meaning, that quiet but persistent whisper in your soul. It's the voice of God drawing you closer. You've been selected for a divine purpose, not because of perfection, but because of potential. So stay with me. Watch until the very end, because what we uncover here could be the very message your soul has been longing for in this season of your life. Let me begin by speaking to the weary ones, those who have quietly considered giving up. Maybe you're tired, not just in your body, but in your soul. Maybe you've asked questions in the dark. Where is God? When will this pain end? Why does life feel so heavy? And in the silence, you've started to wonder if any of it matters. I want you to know this: you're still here, and that matters. Your breath is proof that hope hasn't left you. I know the journey has been long. You've tried, failed, believed, doubted, and now you're at a crossroads. So let me ask you, what if the breakthrough is hidden just beyond the moment you're about to quit? What if the pain you're feeling is not the end, but the beginning of transformation? What if this very moment is holy ground, not because it feels good, but because God is in it with you? This message is for those standing in the tension, struggling to hold on. If that's you, then you're exactly where you're meant to be. And now, if anything I've said so far has resonated with something deep inside you, I want to invite you to stay with me. Don't just skim the surface. Let's dive deeper. Let's unravel the question, the doubts, the fears, and uncover the spiritual truths that will lift your soul. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button so we can continue this journey together. And if you're ready for God to move in your life, drop a 777 in the comments below. That's our signal, our covenant, that we're expecting divine alignment. Don't forget to like the video too, because someone else out there might need exactly what you're hearing. Let's take this step together. Your journey of spiritual awakening starts right now. If you're still here, still listening, then that alone speaks volumes. It means that despite the opposition, despite the confusion, despite the emotional weight, you're still standing. Maybe you don't feel strong. Maybe your heart is tired, your soul stretched, your hope barely flickering. But presence matters. Showing up matters. Choosing to hear truth, even when your mind is filled with noise, matters. You have made it through things that should have crushed you, and you are not done. God is not finished writing your story, and you are not running on empty. You are running on grace. You may not see the finish line yet, but there is progress in every unseen step. What you're going through now is not the end. It's the middle. And the middle is where God does His deepest work. You were created for more than survival. You were made to overcome. The pain you've experienced is not your identity. It's the soil from which your purpose will grow. The wounds you carry are not signs of failure. They're places where light will eventually break through. Every struggle has shaped you for the strength required in the next chapter. Every delay has prepared you for deeper dependence. God hasn't been wasting time. He's been building endurance, wisdom, and character in you. So take a deep breath, lift your head, and remind your soul of what is true. You are more than your circumstance, and you are never alone. You are stepping into something greater. Even if you can't see it, even if it still feels distant, it is already set in motion. God's hand is over every detail. He sees beyond what you can perceive. That's why faith is so vital, not because it's the absence of questions, but because it's the courage to trust while the questions remain. You don't need every answer to take your next step. You just need the assurance that the one who walks with you is faithful, and He is. And now, as we shift from reflection into prayer, I invite you to go with me, not just in words, but in spirit. This is your moment to lean in fully, to offer every question, fear, and hidden desire to God. It's time to surrender not only what has happened, but also what's next. Father, I come before you on behalf of every listener, every heart that made it to this moment, not by accident, but by your design. You know each soul intimately. You know the past they carry, the pressures they feel, and the dreams they're too afraid to speak aloud. You know what's been lost. You know what's still waiting to be found. But more than that, you know what comes next. And today, Lord, I'm asking that you would lead them into it, not into mere routine or shallow ambition, but into assignment, into the divine mission you have carved out for their life. Move them beyond confusion, into clarity, beyond hesitation, into holy confidence. Silence the noise of fear and amplify the whisper of your spirit. For those who feel stuck, break the mental chains. For those who feel small, show them how powerful obedience can be. For those who feel unseen, remind them that you've had your eyes on them the entire time. I ask that you would stir the fire again. Let courage rise, not the kind that relies on emotion, but the kind rooted in identity. Let them see who they really are, chosen, equipped, called, and sent. I ask for direction that's unmistakable, for doors to open that no man can shut, and for peace to go with them as they move. May every step they take from this moment forward be filled with your presence and aligned with your will. Strengthen their spirit when they grow weary. Remind them to get back up when they fall. Surround them with divine connections, with people who speak life and wisdom, who call them higher. Use their story, even the parts they've been ashamed of, as a testimony that reveals your redemption. Speak purpose into their confusion life, into their dry places, and hope into every area they've been tempted to give up on. I thank you, Father, that you do not call the qualified, you qualify the called. So take their willing heart, their surrendered yes, and do what only you can. Write the next chapter of their lives with boldness, with beauty, and with eternal impact. From this moment forward, awaken them to the mission at hand. Not someday, not next year, but now. Their time is now. Their purpose is alive, and you are faithful to complete what you've begun. In Jesus' name, Amen. If this message touched you, I want to personally invite you to go a step further. Show your support by hitting the like button. It helps others find this word when they need it most. If you haven't yet, make sure to subscribe. This isn't just another channel. It's a community built for people like you who are serious about walking in faith, discovering their purpose, and living fully for God. When you comment below with 777, you're not just typing numbers, you're stepping into alignment. It's a sign that you're ready for divine order, spiritual clarity, and a future shaped by God's hand. Join us, grow with us, and be a part of something greater. This is your space to learn, to connect, and to move boldly into everything God created you for. Progress doesn't always look like a straight path forward. Sometimes it looks like crawling when you thought you'd be flying. Sometimes it looks like wiping tears and scare while telling the world you're okay. And sometimes it simply looks like surviving one more day when you didn't think you could. You may not be where you imagined you would be by now. The dream may still feel distant, the pieces scattered, the picture unfinished. But don't ignore this truth. You are no longer where you used to be. Your growth isn't loud. It doesn't always announce itself, but it's real. It's visible in the way you handle storms now that used to drown you. It's there in the quiet victories, the healed perspectives, the moments you chose faith over fear, even when no one else saw. Progress, when measured by heaven's standard, has little to do with how fast you move, and everything to do with who you're becoming along the way. There's something sacred about the middle. The middle is where most people give up, but it's also where the deepest transformation happens. You may feel stuck between the promise and its fulfillment, between the prayer and the answer. But that doesn't mean you're stagnant. Movement in the spirit often doesn't resemble movement in the physical. Sometimes the greatest leaps forward are the ones made in silence and surrender and choosing hope again after disappointment. This is the terrain of spiritual progress, not perfection, not performance, but presence. Being present with God, even when you're unsure, showing up in your weakness, and still saying, "I trust you." I've walked with people who thought they had no strength left, only to discover that faith was still flickering inside them, like a coal buried in ash. That coal is enough. It doesn't take blazing confidence to move forward. It takes willingness. A small yes, a fragile but honest prayer. And here's the truth I've come to live by: God never measures your worth by how strong you feel. He looks at your endurance, your obedience, your heart. You don't need to be whole to be worthy. You don't need to have it all figured out to be on the right path. Hope is not the absence of doubt. It's the courage to believe while still wrestling with questions. And if that's where you are wrestling, waiting, wondering, know this: it still counts. Your progress is not disqualified by your process. There's no expiration date on growth. There's no cutoff point for grace. God's patience with you is greater than your pressure to be perfect. Every setback you faced has carried hidden seeds of strength. Every delay has given you a deeper dependency on His guidance. You're not behind. You're not broken. You are being built layer by layer, lesson by lesson. So, if you've been beating yourself up because you're not farther along, take a breath. You're not behind, you're not disqualified. You are on the journey, and that's what matters. Grace doesn't wait for you at the finish line. It walks with you every step of the way. Faith isn't about faking strength. It's about trusting in a strength greater than your own. And if you've made it this far through heartbreak, through weariness, through silence, then you've already proven something powerful. You've proven that you're still reaching, still believing, still moving. Hold on to that. When your mind tells you you're not enough, when fear whispers that you'll never make it, go back to the truth that got you this far. You are being shaped by something holy. You're becoming someone stronger, and that process, even in its messiness, is evidence that you're not just surviving, you're growing. And growth in the hands of God always leads somewhere beautiful, even if the road is long and winding. The transformation happening in you now will sustain the future calling God is preparing for you. So trust the process even when it's painful. Trust the journey even when it's unclear. And trust the one who walks beside you, always steady, always faithful, always enough. God's hand is on your story, and His grace is your momentum. You don't need to see the destination today. You just need to take the next step. Trust that. Trust Him. And above all, keep walking. Time has a rhythm, and Ecclesiastes chapter 3 paints that rhythm with poetic precision. There's a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to uproot, a time to weep and a time to laugh. The writer outlines a sacred cadence to life's seasons of movement, seasons of stillness, seasons of joy and grief. But for all the rhythms listed, one never appears. There is no mention of a time to give up. It's not there. I've read that chapter over and over, and every time the absence of those words is striking. Not once does Scripture tell us that surrendering to despair is ever part of the divine schedule. That omission speaks volumes. If you're listening for divine permission to quit, you won't find it there. Life flows in seasons, each one unique in its demands and its gifts. Some seasons bring clarity. Others demand trust in the fog. Some allow for celebration. Others call for endurance. But none require surrender to hopelessness. The process may wear you down, but it's never designed to destroy you. Even the harshest winter in your soul does not signal the end. Winter doesn't cancel spring, it prepares the ground for it. And the same is true for you. The season you're in right now, no matter how bleak or dry or difficult, is not your conclusion. It's a chapter, a necessary part of your transformation. And you need to know deeply and without question that no chapter of your life is written in vain when God is the author. In all the years I've spent wrestling with truth, I've learned that quitting is not just a decision. It's a mindset that grows silently over time. It doesn't announce itself suddenly. It creeps in slowly when exhaustion goes unspoken, when disappointment festers, when prayer feels unanswered. That is the soil where the seed of giving up begins to grow. But once you see it, once you name it, it loses power. That's when you realize quitting is not in your design. You were created to endure, not because you have all the answers, but because the one who holds all answers is walking with you. Too many people treat hard times as divine rejection, assuming that if the journey is painful, then it must be wrong. But I've found the opposite to be true. The pain is often a sign that something real is happening, something worth pursuing. God never promised us ease. He promised us presence. That means even in the middle of the struggle, you are not walking alone. The pressure you feel may be great, but His strength in you is greater. And here's the part I hope you never forget. There is no expiration date on your purpose. God doesn't abandon plans because we feel tired or broken. He doesn't give up when we're discouraged. So why should we? The world will always offer a way out. It will whisper that quitting is safer, more logical, less painful. But spiritual wisdom teaches us to ask different questions. Not, how can I escape this, but what is God doing in this? That shift in perspective is everything. You move from victimhood to vision, from avoidance to alignment. You begin to see that your season is not a trap, but a training ground. You stop looking for exits and start listening for direction. When I reflect on the people who inspire me most, those who've lived lives of substance integrity and spiritual depth, they all have something in common. They stayed, not because they were superhuman, but because they trusted God more than they trusted their emotions. They refused to measure the value of their season by how they felt in it. And I believe the same can be true for you. Staying doesn't mean being passive. It means anchoring yourself in truth, even when everything around you shifts. It means choosing hope over resignation again and again. I've said it before and I'll say it again. You were never meant to walk away from the work God is doing in you. His timing is often slower than our preference, but it is never off. So if it hasn't happened yet, that doesn't mean it won't. Delay is not denial. Waiting is not wasting. Your story is not finished. And your current chapter, however painful, is not pointless. The God who breathed life into you didn't do so just to watch you give up halfway through the journey. He placed within you a resilience that is awakened in adversity, not defeated by it. You don't need to be fearless to keep going. You don't need perfect faith to keep moving. You just need enough trust to say, not yet. I'm not done. And that decision, that declaration, it rewrites the narrative. Suddenly, the storm doesn't mark your end. It marks your proving ground. You become the kind of person who rises, not because the season changes, but because you choose to be faithful through it. So today, if you find yourself tempted to give up, remember Ecclesiastes. Remember the list of seasons. Not one of them is labeled as a time to quit. That absence is divine. It is God's whisper to your soul that you are called to endure, to trust, to walk through every season with purpose. Your life may shift in ways you never predicted, but your calling to perseverance remains unchanged. That call has not expired. That invitation still stands. Keep walking. Keep believing. There is no time to quit. Not now. Not ever. Success in its truest form is not reserved for the flawless. It does not belong to the ones who never fall, but to the ones who fall and rise again. Over and over, not out of pride, but because something deeper in them refuses to surrender. I've seen many with extraordinary talent never reach their purpose because they let one fall define them. And I've seen others quiet and overlooked rise from the ashes of repeated defeat simply because they chose to stand again. That choice one made in pain and silence and solitude is what defines greatness in the eyes of heaven. It's never the fall that breaks a person. It's staying down that does the most damage. The wisdom of Proverbs 24:16 has echoed through my soul like a steady drumbeat in the middle of chaos. Though the righteous fall 7 times, they rise again. That verse isn't just a comfort, it's a commission. It tells us plainly that righteousness is not the absence of stumbling. In fact, stumbling is assumed. But what makes the righteous distinct is their determination to rise not once, not twice, but every time. There's a divine persistence woven into those who truly walk with God. They don't deny their falls, they respond to them. They get back up not because it's easy, but because giving up is no longer an option when you understand who walks beside you. Falling is not the failure. The real danger comes when we start believing that failure is our final chapter. I found that one of the most dangerous lies we believe is that failure is a verdict. But failure isn't final unless you surrender to it. Spiritually, failure can become fertile ground. It humbles us, strips away our illusions, and forces us to confront who we really are apart from our performance. And in that exposed space, God begins to build something new. He doesn't discard the broken pieces. He reshapes them. What looks like ruin from the outside is often the beginning of rebuilding on the inside. That's why I no longer see my falls as the end of the road. I've come to recognize them as turning points, divine intersections, where grace meets grit and calls me back to purpose. The world may not applaud your decision to stand up again, but heaven does. Sometimes the greatest testimony you'll ever have won't come from how high you climbed, but how many times you got back up. Because each rising tells a story. It says to the darkness, I'm still here. It says to doubt, I still believe. It says to your own soul, I will not be defined by this. And when others see you rise, they find the courage to rise too. Perseverance becomes contagious. Your resilience becomes a reflection of God's strength, not your own. You become a living sermon, a walking reminder that God still restores, still empowers, still calls the fallen to rise. Even more than that, rising again deepens your faith. It becomes personal. It becomes rooted in something stronger than feelings. When you've tasted failure and chosen grace, you begin to understand that God's love is not reserved for those who get it all right. His love runs deepest when you've come to the end of yourself and still choose to reach for Him. That reaching, however feeble, is everything. It's the moment your story starts again. So, if you've fallen, don't waste time with shame. Don't rehearse the failure until it becomes your identity. Shame is not your calling. Defeat is not your future. Instead, reclaim your posture, rise again. Not with arrogance, but with quiet confidence in the God who never left your side. There is no limit to how many times He'll lift you so long as you're willing to reach for His hand. You were never meant to stay down. Stand tall, stand again. This moment may be the 8th time, and the 8th time could be the one that changes everything. Your comeback doesn't have to be dramatic to be divine. It can start with a whisper, a prayer, a single step forward. Every time you rise, you reinforce your identity, not as someone who failed, but as someone who refuses to stay down. And in that, God is glorified. In that, purpose is renewed. In that, your life becomes a witness to what grace can do when we choose to believe that the story is not over. So rise again. always? It's a strange thing how we can come to believe that if we don't see a way, then there must not be one. That if every door slams shut, every plan falls apart, and every step forward turns into a wall, then maybe the journey is over. But I've learned that God's ways are not restrained by human logic or visible options. He does not consult what is seen before he acts. He is not limited by the paths we see before us. When everything appears blocked, that's when he begins his work. When the map shows no road ahead, he becomes the mapmaker, not just a guide through the wilderness, but the one who creates a passage where no passage ever existed before. There are seasons when your prayers return unanswered, and the silence grows louder than your faith. When you look around and see no movement, no sign, no reason to hope. I have walked through moments when everything I knew unraveled, and I questioned whether I had misunderstood the call entirely. But even in those valleys, I began to discover something powerful. God's absence of clarity is not his absence of care. His silence does not mean stillness. Sometimes his work is invisible until it's undeniable. What appears to be inactivity is actually divine intention. He is never idle. He is always unfolding something beyond what your current view can hold. I have come to believe that the moment you think you've hit a dead end may actually be a holy beginning. It might be the turning point you didn't know you needed. When your strength ends, his grace begins. When your plans fall through, his promises rise to the surface. That is why faith is so necessary. Not faith in outcomes, but faith in the one who authors them. What matters most in these moments is not your ability to predict the outcome, but your willingness to keep believing even when you can't trace the process. Faith, after all, is not about knowing the how. It's about trusting the who. There's something deeply spiritual about refusing to give up when reason tells you to. That refusal is not blind stubbornness, it's sacred resistance. It's the belief that God is still writing even when you've run out of lines to read. The truth is, he asks us for something simple yet incredibly difficult. Don't quit. Don't back away from the promise because it's taking longer than you thought. Don't step away from the edge just because you can't see the bridge yet. If God said he would make a way, he will. And often that way won't appear until your faith says yes without a guarantee. Over time, I've realized that trusting God when everything is clear is easy. But trusting him when everything is fog is where real faith is born. You may not see the next chapter, but the author has already finished the story. He's not improvising, he's orchestrating. And sometimes what feels like a delay is divine construction. God carving out something better than what you asked for. What you think is the pause is actually the preparation. He is aligning moments, people, and provision in ways you may never fully see. Your role is not to understand every step. Your role is to keep stepping. I've learned to stop asking God for the shortest way and start asking him for the surest way. The route that builds my trust shapes my heart and keeps me close to him. Because the goal isn't speed, it's transformation. It's about becoming the kind of person who can carry what he's preparing for you. And that kind of person is forged in uncertainty, not comfort. If God gave you the destination without the development, it would crush you. So the wait isn't punishment, it's protection. So if you're standing in a place where the horizon is dark and the doors are all locked, remember this: God does not need a door to open one. He does not need a road to part the sea. He does not need permission to move mountains. He asks one thing: faith that stays, a heart that refuses to let go, a spirit that whispers even through tears, "I believe you'll make a way." That kind of faith invites the miraculous. That kind of trust creates space for heaven to intervene. When everything says it's over, God steps in and says, "Watch what I can do." And in that moment, the impossible begins to bow. What you thought was the end becomes the beginning of something only God could have written. Keep walking. The way is already being made. There are moments in life when silence feels louder than any noise, when the prayers feel unanswered, the sky looks empty, and the soul wonders if anyone is listening. In those moments, faith is tested not by external hardship, but by internal doubt. You might be walking through pain right now, not because you did something wrong, but because you've been chosen to grow deeper. And that growth often begins in the shadows, when your senses cannot locate God, but your spirit is asked to trust that He is still near. This is where the mystery of His presence unfolds, constant, faithful, even when undetected. I have learned over the years that God's presence does not always arrive with thunder. It rarely speaks in shouts. More often it whispers in the stillness, in the breath you didn't think you had strength to take, in the calm that follows tears, in the courage to get up one more time. His nearness isn't always proven by what we feel. It's grounded in what He's promised. And His promise is not conditional. He didn't say, "I'll be with you when you're strong," or "I'll remain if you don't mess up." He said, "I will never leave you nor forsake you." Those words are not poetic suggestions, they are covenant truth. So, when life feels empty, and your emotions betray you, that is not a signal of His absence. That is an opportunity to remember that His presence is not measured by sensation. If your faith depends entirely on how God feels, you'll be tossed back and forth with every emotional shift. But when your faith rests in who He is, you begin to walk on more solid ground. He is not absent just because He's quiet. In fact, I found that some of God's most transformative work is done in silence. He doesn't need to shout to be near. His nearness is not performance, it's identity. It is who He is, Emmanuel, God with us. Sometimes we confuse comfort with confirmation. We think if God is with us, then we won't feel lost or confused. But in truth, His presence often meets us in the middle of chaos, not the absence of it. Think of Daniel in the lion's den, or the 3 Hebrew men in the furnace. God didn't keep them from the trial, He entered the trial with them. The power wasn't in their escape. It was in the fact that the fire couldn't consume them, and the lions couldn't devour them because He was there. That same presence walks with you now, not to always prevent storms, but to make sure they don't sink you. There is a grace that only appears when you stop looking for God in grand gestures and begin recognizing Him in the ordinary, in the quiet breath of morning, in the strength to speak kindness when you're exhausted, in the way your heart softens again after pain. These are not small things. They are signs of divine nearness. And when you begin to live with that awareness, you no longer chase spiritual highs to prove He's with you. You begin to walk with assurance, even in valleys, because His presence is your foundation. Faith matures when it learns to hold on, even when there's no visible evidence. It grows when it chooses truth over feeling, covenant over comfort. And the truth is this: you are never alone. That isn't a feel-good phrase, it's a spiritual reality. Whether you are in the middle of a hospital room, a courtroom, an empty bedroom, or a private heartbreak, the presence of God fills the space you're in. He doesn't wait for you to arrive somewhere better. He joins you where you are. You might not understand the season you're walking through. You might be questioning how long it will last, or what it's meant to teach. But one thing you never have to question is who walks with you in it. And when the enemy whispers that you've been forgotten, that no one sees, that even heaven is silent, stand on this: God is still here, not distant, not disinterested, present, active, aware. The one who holds the universe still knows the count of hairs on your head and the weight your heart carries. I've learned not to base my hope on the absence of struggle, but on the assurance of His companionship through it. Pain may stay for a night, but His presence endures forever. And when you begin to believe that, truly believe it, something shifts. Your soul becomes anchored, not because life is easy, but because God is immovable. You stop measuring success by what you avoid and start measuring it by how closely you walk with the one who never leaves. So, when doubt rises, when discouragement sneaks in, speak to your soul, "He is with me." When the room feels empty and your prayers feel weak, remind yourself, "He is with me." When you are afraid to take the next step, when you fear the future, hold on to the promise, "He is with me." That truth has sustained me through seasons of silence and seasons of storm. It is the truth that carries me still. His presence is not earned, it is given. And once it's given, it never leaves. No matter what season you're in, no matter how many questions remain unanswered, you can be sure of God's presence is your constant. His love does not withdraw. His Spirit does not abandon. Even in your lowest valley, you are surrounded, not because you feel it, but because He said so. And when the God of eternity speaks, His word outlasts the storm. That's the foundation of enduring faith. That's the sacred truth that steadies a trembling heart. And that above all else is the anchor for every soul seeking hope today. There comes a point in every journey when the pressure feels unbearable, when the weight of expectation, disappointment, or exhaustion starts to whisper that quitting might be the easier option. And for a moment, it makes sense. The struggle is real. The fatigue is undeniable. You've given so much already, and the results feel so small in return. But this is the moment that matters most, not because you feel strong, but because what you choose now will echo far beyond this pain. What you decide in the silence will shape not only your future, but the lives connected to yours. There are people depending on your endurance, whether you realize it or not. Family members, children, friends, even strangers watching from a distance. Your perseverance is part of their hope. We don't live in isolation. Our strength becomes strength for others. When you refuse to quit even in private, you send a message to the world around you. It's possible to stand even when everything says fall. The choice to continue is not just personal, it's generational. You are building something deeper than achievement. You are building legacy. I've come to believe that legacy isn't about fame or recognition. It's about the quiet decisions to keep showing up. To be a father who stays a mother, who holds steady, a friend who doesn't give up when others walk away. It's about waking up on a day when your soul feels worn and still choosing to love, to try to believe again. That's where true spiritual maturity begins, not in mountaintop moments, but in valley decisions. That's where character is formed and where the call of God is deepened. You have a divine responsibility, not a burden, but a sacred calling to rise even when it's hard. Not because you have something to prove, but because you have something to protect. There is purpose on your life. There is an assignment only you can fulfill, and the enemy of your soul knows that. That's why the pressure is so fierce. It's not just life happening to you, it's resistance to the impact you're meant to make. But quitting doesn't silence that pressure. It simply delays what was always meant to be yours through perseverance. And make no mistake, the spiritual war you're in is real, but so is the strength inside of you. You've already survived more than what should have broken you. You've endured nights of anxiety, days of confusion, weeks of waiting, and here you are, still breathing, still standing. That's not a small thing. That's evidence of divine presence, and that presence invites you to stop measuring your life by progress and start measuring it by persistence. You are not weak for wanting to quit, but you become strong the moment you decide you won't. There's a power in speaking your stance aloud. To say with clarity, even when the odds are against you, I will not quit. I will not abandon what I've been entrusted with. I will not shrink back from the weight of calling or the responsibility of hope. I will not let fatigue convince me that I'm finished. Because God's grace did not bring me this far to let me fall. There is more ahead, and it begins with the decision to stay. I've seen people reclaim their purpose not with dramatic miracles, but with simple declarations. They stood up in quiet rooms, whispered truth over their own doubts, and kept moving forward one honest step at a time. That's what it means to walk by faith. To press on when there's no applause, no clear result, just the firm conviction that you are not done yet, that God still has more to do in you and through you, and that your life, your story is worth fighting for. So today I urge you to draw a line in the sand. Speak to every voice that tells you to give up and answer with resolve. Say it not with arrogance but with assurance. I am not quitting. I am not abandoning what heaven has assigned to me. My family, my calling, my future, they matter too much. The pain may be present, but the purpose is greater. I am not defined by how I feel in this moment. I am defined by the one who called me before I ever saw this struggle. Stand tall. Lift your head even if your heart is heavy. Know that every step forward carries the weight of courage. And even when progress feels slow, the fact that you're still here means you've already won half the battle. Do not give in to the voice that says it's over. The truth is something holy is still unfolding. The story is still being written, and the strength you need will be given to you the moment you decide to continue. This is not about pretending everything is fine. This is about standing firm in the reality that even in brokenness you are being held. Even in uncertainty you are being led. And even in weakness you are being made strong. So don't walk away. Don't shut the door. This is not the end. It's the turning point. And the declaration you make now when no one else sees is the beginning of the breakthrough you've been waiting for. You are not just surviving. You are rising. And you are not alone. Thoughts are not passive. They are seeds, and what you nurture in your mind will eventually grow into your actions, your patterns, your reality. Every thought has a trajectory. It leads somewhere whether you realize it or not. I've seen people lose battles not because they lacked strength, skill, or opportunity, but because their thinking became saturated with defeat. They allowed hopelessness to set the narrative. When you dwell constantly on quitting, it doesn't remain an idea, it becomes your direction. You start reading every difficulty as a signal to stop. You begin to interpret resistance as a closed door, instead of a moment to rise. Delays feel like denials. Pressure feels like punishment. And eventually, the mind so rehearsed in negativity surrenders before the body ever does. That's why guarding your thought life is not just practical wisdom, it is a spiritual discipline. Scripture reminds us, as a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. Those are not just poetic words, they are spiritual architecture. Your internal dialogue quietly shapes your external decisions. If your thoughts are consumed with retreat, your life will soon reflect that withdrawal. But the opposite is also true. If your thoughts are shaped by the promises of God, your heart remains anchored, and even in storms, your steps carry forward momentum. When you begin to act based not on what you feel, but on what you believe God has spoken, everything starts to shift. This is the space where faith becomes more than belief, it becomes a mindset, a frame of thinking that aligns with divine truth rather than temporary emotion. To live with a faith-centered mind is to intentionally reject the voices that echo fear and replace them with the voice that calls you by name. It's not about pretending everything is fine. It's about choosing to remember what is eternal. When everything around you is unstable, you stop feeding the thoughts that drain you and you start nurturing the ones that sustain you. You begin to wake up and speak life over your day. Before the world has a chance to speak discouragement into it, you speak possibility instead of limitation, purpose instead of failure, and perseverance instead of resignation. It's not denial of reality, it's defiance of defeat. It's choosing to align your inner world with the reality of heaven, even when earth tries to convince you otherwise. I've experienced firsthand how powerful this shift can be. There were seasons when my mind felt like a battlefield, when logic said quit and emotion said hide. But in those moments, I learned to speak back, not with hollow phrases or forced positivity, but with the promises of God that never expire. I reminded myself that God's truth is not dependent on how I feel, and that His plans don't collapse under pressure. That kind of thinking doesn't develop by accident. It's cultivated, built day by day through spiritual discipline and small decisions. The decision to take thoughts captive, the decision to rehearse truth, not trauma. That process builds maturity. It builds resilience. It builds identity rooted in something deeper than circumstance. So, if your thoughts lately have been circling around quitting, if your inner voice is heavy with discouragement, pause and ask yourself, what am I feeding my mind? What voices have I given authority in my thinking? What inner story have I been rehearsing in silence? Your mindset will either become the wind behind your calling or the anchor that keeps you stuck. Every great act of perseverance starts with a single thought that refuses to surrender, a thought that says, I'm not quitting here. Train your mind to return to what God has said, not just what you see. Speak His promises even when your emotions are low. Declare His faithfulness when your feelings are unstable. Fix your focus not on what is temporary, but on what is eternal. The storm you're facing will pass, but the strength of mind you develop inside of it will last. That mindset becomes the foundation for future seasons, future decisions, and future assignments. You'll find that your thinking begins to carry expectation, not dread, joy, not anxiety, conviction, not confusion. In the end, your mindset is your compass. It quietly determines which direction you walk in and how long you stay there. It will either point you toward surrender or point you toward strength. Choose your direction wisely. Choose to believe that what God has spoken over your life is more powerful than any temporary emotion trying to steal your courage. Feed the fire of perseverance, and you will begin to see a shift not just in your circumstances, but in your spirit. Because when your thoughts are rooted in truth, your life starts to move in the direction of strength, stability, and purpose. The battles ahead may still be difficult, but your mind will be anchored and your steps will be steady. And often, that is where the victory begins. Some of the most breathtaking moments in Scripture begin at the edge of hopelessness. These aren't tales polished by comfort, but accounts of real people standing before impossible odds. Their surroundings screamed defeat. Logic offered no solution. And yet, that's where God did His most miraculous work, not in ideal conditions, but in the ruins of human limitation. If you've ever doubted whether your circumstances can change, consider how many times in history God has reversed what looked unchangeable. Abraham and Sarah had lived through decades of barrenness. Time mocked their faith, and age seemed to slam the door on possibility. Everything about their bodies said the promise had expired. But then God moved, not when it was easy to believe, but when it was humanly impossible. In their old age, laughter returned to their tent, not from doubt, but from joy. Isaac was born not because they figured it out, but because God honored His word. That story isn't just about a child. It's about a God who controls time and keeps promises, regardless of biological clocks. Joseph's life unraveled long before it flourished. Sold by his own brothers, wrongfully imprisoned, forgotten by men, his path looked more like punishment than preparation. But the very prison meant to contain him became the gateway to power. Overnight, he went from the darkness of a cell to the throne room of Egypt. That shift didn't come from strategy. It came from sovereignty. What man meant for evil, God turned for good. And the beauty is not just in Joseph's rise, but in the divine reversal that no one saw coming. The Israelites stood paralyzed before the Red Sea, with Pharaoh's army closing in behind them. There were no boats, no bridges, no way forward. But faith doesn't need a visible road. God split the sea not just as an escape route, but as a revelation of who He is. The waters opened not because the people had perfect faith, but because they followed the one who parts the impossible. Their journey didn't end in panic. It began in power. Years later, another moment of tension unfolded at Jericho. A fortified city, impenetrable walls, and a group of former slaves walking in silence. No weapons, no siege engines, just obedience. For 6 days, nothing changed. But on the seventh, after persistent obedience, the walls fell flat. That scene wasn't about noise or might. It was about trust. God didn't call them to fight. He called them to walk and believe that their steps mattered. And in doing so, He showed that obedience is often the catalyst for divine reversal. David stood before Goliath not as a warrior, but as a boy with a sling. The giant had training armor, intimidation, and history on his side. David had faith. One stone, guided by purpose, struck down what an entire army feared. The lesson wasn't in David's skill. It was in his courage to act when everyone else froze. God used what was small and ordinary to bring down what was big and terrifying. That moment reminds me that it's not about having what looks impressive. It's about having God on your side. Then there's Daniel, lowered into a den of lions for refusing to compromise his convictions. The sentence was death. The expectation was silenced by mourning, but the God who created those lions shut their mouths. Daniel walked out untouched, not because the danger wasn't real, but because God was more real. His presence turned a place of judgment into a testimony. What was meant to destroy Daniel became the very thing that displayed God's power. Each of these stories holds a rhythm: impossibility, obedience, divine intervention. They are not legends crafted for inspiration. They are records of reality meant to remind us that God is not constrained by circumstance. His specialty is reversal. He does not need favorable odds or ideal timing. What He requires is a heart that refuses to quit, and eyes that keep watching for the unseen move of heaven. These biblical moments serve as mirrors for our own lives. When you feel surrounded, when the doors close, when time runs out, remember you are in good company. You are walking in the tension where God has always done His best work. And if He has done it before, He will do it again. Not necessarily the same way, but with the same authority. His nature hasn't changed. The God of Abraham and Sarah, of Joseph and David, is still active. He's still writing stories where dead ends become open roads and despair becomes destiny. So the next time you stand before your own version of the Red Sea, don't just ask for a way out, look for the miracle. Don't just pray for escape, expect transformation, because every impossible situation carries within it the potential for divine interruption. And if you dare to trust, even when there's no logical reason to, you may find that the very moment you feared the most becomes the doorway into your purpose. That is the kind of God we serve. The one who reverses, restores, and rewrites stories with a hand stronger than history. Your life is not a random sequence of events. It is not a collection of disconnected moments stitched together by accident. Every chapter has been overseen by the one who knows the end from the beginning. You may not understand the plot twist you're facing right now. It might feel like the story has stalled or gone off course, but I assure you the author has not put down the pen. God is still writing, and He does not abandon His narrative in the middle. What may seem like delay to you is often divine structure being formed behind the scenes. His timing is never late, only layered. Layered with purpose, meaning, and a perspective we cannot yet see from our limited view. There is a reason why Scripture refers to him not just as creator, but as the author and finisher of our faith. Authors know where the story is going. They allow tension, introduce obstacles, even let characters face failure not to harm them but to shape them. Growth comes from pressure. Revelation comes from conflict. Redemption shines brightest when hope feels lost. So, if your current chapter feels dark or uncertain, that doesn't mean it's the conclusion. It means something deeper is unfolding. Something meaningful is being written through your perseverance. Every line of suffering, every paragraph of waiting, and every page turned with trembling hands is filled with eternal significance. I've learned to stop judging the worth of my life by the clarity of my circumstances. Some of the most critical turns in my journey came when I was least aware of their importance. That's the beauty of divine authorship. God uses the unseen, the slow, the confusing, even the painful parts to build something sacred. He is not rushed by your timeline. He is not restricted by your detours. His sovereignty covers not only the breakthrough moments, but also the long, quiet stretches where you're simply called to trust. What feels like stagnation is often preparation. What looks like silence is often the sacred pause before the most meaningful revelation. And that trust matters, because prayer in the waiting is not wasted breath. It is alignment. It is communion with the one who already sees the chapter you haven't reached yet. Every time you pray, even when nothing seems to change, you are connecting with the one who holds the outline of your life. You are reminding your soul that this chapter will not last forever. Even when you feel forgotten, your voice is not lost. God hears, and more than that, He answers in ways that often don't make sense at first, but carry wisdom you'll only see in hindsight. That's why persistence in prayer is an act of faith, because it believes that the author is still invested, still involved, still in control. There will be times when life makes you feel like the story has lost direction, when grief lingers, when dreams seem delayed, when the outcome looks nothing like you envisioned. It's tempting to think the narrative has fallen apart, but it hasn't. God doesn't need your story to be linear. He specializes in weaving threads that look chaotic into something deeply coherent. He doesn't need your story to look like anyone else's either. Each chapter, no matter how confusing, is leading you somewhere redemptive. Each detour is divinely edited. Each unanswered question is an invitation to trust more deeply in the one who is still writing. Sometimes the hardest thing to do is keep turning the page, to show up again, to hope again, to believe that the story will make sense one day. But that simple act of faith, refusing to give up, writes a powerful sentence across the chapters of your life. It says that you believe in a God who doesn't stop mid-story, that you believe in a love that doesn't leave you when the pages go dark, that you believe in redemption even when you can't see the resolution. So today, instead of trying to rewrite the past or rush the future, hand the pen back to the one who never makes a mistake. Surrender doesn't mean inactivity. It means yielding the plot to the one who knows where this is going. It means trusting that even the painful paragraphs are necessary to build the depth of character your calling requires. You are not forgotten. You are not left behind. You are not abandoned in a story without meaning. The author is still present, still writing, still weaving something beautiful out of what you may not yet understand. Keep praying, keep trusting, keep turning the page, even if it's with trembling hands. Because what's ahead is not only worth the wait, it's beyond what you imagined. The best chapters are still being written, and when they arrive, you'll realize that none of it was wasted. Not one sentence, not one tear, not one moment of silence. The author who began your story will be faithful to finish it and finish it well. There is a danger in letting the temporary redefine the eternal. Pain has a way of shrinking your vision. When life presses in, when trials come unannounced and linger longer than expected, it becomes easy to see only what's directly in front of you. The mind begins to magnify the immediate. The soul begins to panic within the limits of what it can feel and see. But the truth is, your current situation, no matter how overwhelming, is not the whole story. It is only a scene, not the conclusion. And the mistake many make is building permanent decisions on moments that are designed to pass. Paul understood this deeply. In 2 Corinthians 4:16-18, he wrote from a place of lived suffering, and yet his words offer a kind of clarity that only comes from eternity-shaped thinking. He said, "Therefore we do not lose heart. Though outwardly we are wasting away, yet inwardly we are being renewed day by day. For our light and momentary troubles are achieving for us an eternal glory that far outweighs them all. So we fix our eyes not on what is seen, but on what is unseen. For what is seen is temporary, but what is unseen is eternal." These words are not poetic exaggeration. They are spiritual recalibration. They remind us that everything we face now is preparing something weighty in the unseen. Suffering often blinds us to purpose. It's hard to imagine glory when you're in grief. It's difficult to think about eternity when anxiety grips your chest or when loss leaves a gaping hole in your heart. But even then, especially then, God calls us to lift our gaze, not to deny the hardship, but to reframe it. Because when you believe that what's happening now is not the end, but the preparation for something that lasts forever, everything changes. Pain becomes process, delay becomes development, and even silence becomes sacred. I've had to learn this the hard way. There were seasons when it felt like the weight would never lift. Days where disappointment crept in so slowly it almost became normal. But each time I wanted to give up, I returned to Paul's words, not just to read them, but to anchor myself in them. If what I see is temporary, then I must choose not to let it dictate what I believe. Faith is not passive in the face of pain. It's a discipline, a focus, a constant realignment back to what is unseen, yet more real than anything I can touch. Too many people forfeit their future because they can't see past the moment. They walk away from callings, relationships, even life itself, because they've mistaken a season for a sentence. But the truth is, feelings pass, storms end, nights break into morning, and God has never once abandoned a heart that stayed open to Him through the hardest parts. The decision to endure today is a declaration that you believe in a tomorrow beyond what your eyes can currently confirm. This isn't about positive thinking. It's about eternal perspective. It's about learning to see your struggle as something that's working for you, not just against you. Paul called it achieving for us an eternal glory. That means your pain is not wasted. It's producing something. It's forming in you a depth, a strength of faith that won't collapse under pressure. You may not see it now, but you will see it. And when you do, you'll know that not a single moment was meaningless. So be careful what you conclude in moments of sorrow. Don't make forever decisions in temporary valleys. Don't trade what's eternal for what only feels urgent. Your current struggle is not worth your future peace. Your present confusion is not worth forfeiting your purpose. Fix your eyes higher. Plant your heart deeper. Let the reality of eternity shape how you move through this hour. I have found that clarity rarely comes all at once. But the more I've chosen to align my heart with what is eternal, the more I've learned to live with hope even when answers are delayed. And in that hope, I've found resilience. Not because life got easier, but because my perspective got wider. Eternity stretches the horizon of your thinking. It reminds you that what is happening in you is more important than what's happening to you. If you're in a place right now where you feel tempted to give up, remember this: everything seen is passing. Every hardship has an expiration date, but the work God is doing in your soul through it is timeless. What He's forming in you will not fade. What He's preparing you for will not wither. So fix your eyes not on what hurts, but on what lasts. Not on what frustrates, but on what God is forming. And as you do, you'll begin to live not just for the next relief, but for the next revelation. You'll begin to walk with peace in the pressure because your eyes are set on something no storm can shake. That is the promise of 2 Corinthians 4. That is the hope of every heart anchored in heaven. And that is the truth that will carry you through. Growth rarely comes wrapped in comfort. The seasons that stretch us, challenge us, and unsettle us are often the very ones that bring the deepest spiritual transformation. While it's natural to seek ease, it is through adversity that faith is refined. Character is tested, and purpose becomes clearer. The struggles you face are not interruptions to your journey, they are part of the process. What feels like resistance is often divine shaping. God does not waste pain. He uses it to produce something in you that prosperity never could. I've found that when things fall apart on the outside, it's often because something stronger is being built on the inside. When your plans fail and your expectations shatter, you're left with nothing to lean on but God. And that's when real faith begins. Faith that isn't tied to outcomes or performance. Faith that breathes through silence, stands in uncertainty, and still chooses to believe. That kind of faith cannot be taught in books. It is forged in the furnace of hardship, and it becomes a foundation that storms cannot shake. Difficulty has a way of stripping us down to the essentials. It clears out the noise and reveals what's real. In moments of pressure, we find out what we truly believe, who we trust, and where we run for refuge. God uses these moments not to destroy us, but to develop us. He is not interested in shallow comfort that keeps us spiritually weak. He is invested in forming something eternal, something unshakable. And often that begins with allowing us to walk through fires we would never choose for ourselves. Pain reveals what comfort hides. When everything is going well, it's easy to mask insecurity, to avoid dependence on God, to assume we're in control. But trial brings clarity. It peels back the illusion of strength and exposes our need for grace. And once that need is fully seen, God meets us with more than just relief. He brings revelation. He shows us not just who He is, but who we're becoming through Him. He reveals a strength we didn't know we had, and invites us to lean into a future we never imagined. This kind of growth doesn't come in a moment. It comes in the middle, in the days when nothing makes sense but you keep showing up, in the nights when you cry out and the heavens seem silent, in the choices to forgive, to keep going, to worship through the wounds. These are sacred decisions. They are not seen by many, but they are known by heaven. And in those quiet acts of endurance, transformation is happening. Your faith is not failing, it is deepening. I've watched God take the most broken places in people's lives and turn them into the most powerful testimonies. Not because the pain was easy, but because the person chose not to give up. They allowed God to use the difficulty to shape their thinking, to soften their heart, to prepare them for more. That is what trials do. They prepare, they refine, they make space for something greater than what was lost. And when God brings restoration, it always carries more weight, more depth, and more maturity than what was there before. The story of Scripture is filled with people who grew through pain. Joseph developed wisdom in prison. Moses found courage in the wilderness. David learned trust in the cave. None of them were shaped by success alone. Their influence came through perseverance. And the same is true for you. Your calling is being formed in the tension. Your impact is being cultivated in the strain. God is not absent in the challenge, He is present in the shaping. And the person you are becoming through the pressure is the person who will be able to carry the weight of your purpose. When you start to view trials through this lens, everything shifts. You stop asking, "Why is this happening to me?" and start asking, "What is God forming in me through this?" That change in perspective doesn't remove the pain, but it redeems it. It gives purpose to what would otherwise feel pointless. It turns suffering into soil where strength can grow. And it invites you to trust not just in what God does, but in how He does it, even when it's hard. So, if you're in the middle of something painful right now, know this: you are not being punished. You are being prepared. The discomfort you feel is not a sign that God has abandoned you. It's a signal that He is at work. He's doing something beneath the surface beyond what you can currently see. And though it may not feel like it, this process is not meant to break you. It is meant to build you. Faith that is tested is faith that can be trusted. And when you emerge from this season, you won't just come out stronger, you'll come out changed. With a deeper understanding of grace, a clearer vision of God's goodness, and a faith that can weather the next storm. That is the kind of growth trials produce. Not shallow inspiration, but lasting transformation. Not fleeting emotion, but enduring strength. So don't despise the process. Embrace it. Invite God into it. Ask Him to use every ounce of it. Because one day you'll look back on this season, not as the one that broke you, but as the one that birthed you into the fullness of who you were always meant to become. Growth is not easy, but it is holy. And when God is the one leading the process, every challenge becomes a chapter in the making of something eternal. Endurance is not a passive state. It is an act of spiritual will, a quiet resolve that refuses to give up even when nothing seems to change. There is something sacred about staying faithful through a season that makes no sense to your understanding. James 1:2-4 calls this endurance a necessary part of spiritual maturity. Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. Let perseverance finish its work, so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything. These words aren't just an encouragement. They are a command to stay the course until the transformation is complete. Faith that gives up halfway never sees the fullness of what God was preparing. Perseverance must be allowed to complete its work. That implies a process of progression and often attention. It means there are layers to your development, and each trial is working on a different level of your soul. To interrupt that process is to walk away before the harvest matures. You may not feel the growth yet, but something eternal is being formed inside of you every time you choose to endure when giving up would be easier. Spiritual growth isn't immediate. It rarely gives you instant feedback. There are days when obedience feels unrewarded and prayer feels unreturned. But those are the very moments when perseverance is being forged. Think of it like a seed in the soil. You can't see what's happening beneath the surface, but roots are forming, reaching deep, building the strength to support future fruit. If you dig it up too soon, you abort what was meant to flourish. The same principle applies to your spirit. Endurance creates roots that can't be shaken by external pressure. Too many people forfeit the outcome because they grow weary in the middle. They don't realize that the middle is where most of the transformation takes place. You don't climb a mountain just by standing at the base or celebrating at the top. The climb happens in the struggle, the sweat, the slow progress that no one applauds. But that's also where you gain the strength that will sustain you when the summit comes. The journey shapes the character needed to carry the blessing. If you stop now, you'll never know what God was about to finish. You'll never see the wisdom that was being formed through the pain. You'll miss the clarity that was coming through the confusion. When James says, "Let perseverance finish its work," He's telling you not to rush out of what God is still using. He's urging you to recognize the value of the in-between, the uncomfortable, the slow refinement that turns believers into warriors and spectators into saints. Growth without perseverance is fragile. It doesn't last when pressure returns. But faith that has endured can stand in storms and still sing. It knows that emotions don't determine reality. It knows that silence isn't the same as absence. It knows that God is always doing more than what we can perceive. That kind of faith only comes by not quitting, not giving up, not abandoning the process when it gets messy or long. There will always be voices that tell you it's not worth it, that nothing is changing, that maybe you misunderstood your calling. But those voices do not carry the authority of your Creator. They don't know what's being built inside you, and if you listen to them, you'll surrender something precious in exchange for relief that doesn't last. True peace isn't found in escape. It's found in endurance, in staying planted where God placed you until His work is complete. I've come to see trials not as enemies, but as invitations, not because they feel good, but because they uncover something in me that comfort never would. They force me to dig deeper into truth, to lean harder on grace, to confront parts of myself that I would have ignored. And through it all, perseverance becomes not just something I do, it becomes who I am. A person who continues, who trusts, who keeps walking because the one who called me is faithful. There is a version of you that only perseverance can produce. A wiser you, a more grounded you, a version that's not shaken by every disappointment or discouraged by every delay. That version is being formed right now, and you'll only meet them if you keep going, if you let perseverance have its way, if you trust that what God starts, He finishes, not on your timeline, but always on time. So, whatever you're walking through right now, don't quit the process. Don't despise the pace. Don't curse the silence. Something sacred is happening. Perseverance is doing what only it can do. And when it's done, you won't just be stronger, you'll be whole, not lacking anything. Not defined by the pain, but refined by it. That is the promise. That is the invitation. Stay in it until the work is done. Because the masterpiece God is forming in you is worth every moment of the wait. Falling is not failure in the eyes of God. It's not the end of your story. It's not the proof that you're unworthy or that your faith is weak. It is instead a reminder of your humanity and, more importantly, an opportunity for divine grace to do what only it can do. When you stumble, God doesn't look at you with disappointment or folded arms. He reaches for you. He moves toward you. He is the Father who runs to the child, not with judgment, but with compassion. His response to your fall is never rejection. It's restoration. There's a deeply rooted misconception that struggle pushes God away, that our mistakes somehow disqualify us from His presence. But nothing could be further from the truth. Scripture is full of people who fell, failed, and faltered, and yet they were met with mercy. Peter denied Christ, and Christ came back for him. David committed grave sins, but was still called a man after God's heart. Their worth wasn't measured by how often they stood, but by their willingness to stand again, supported by grace. That same grace is available to you right now, not later, not after you prove yourself, but in this very moment. You are not a project God is tolerating. You are a person He is transforming. And transformation is messy. It involves relapses, tears, regret, and a battle between the old and the new self. But even in that mess, God is not distant. He is closer than ever. He is the voice that says, "Get back up." He is the hand that lifts when you cannot rise on your own. And He never tires of lifting. His patience doesn't run out when you do. His faithfulness doesn't fluctuate with your strength. You were never meant to carry the weight of perfection, only the willingness to be held. This is the beauty of divine love. It doesn't just rescue, it empowers. It doesn't just forgive what was wrong. It calls forth what is right. You are not merely surviving this life with God's help, you are overcoming it. The trials, the failures, the disappointments, they do not define you. The love of God does. And His love is not passive. It is fierce. It fights for you in unseen places. It stands between you and every accusation. It speaks a better word over your life than the voice of shame ever could. Sometimes all you have left is a whisper, "Help me, Lord," and even that is enough. God does not require eloquence. He requires honesty. When you bring your broken pieces, He doesn't say, "Fix it first." He says, "Watch what I can do with that." You are not disqualified by your weakness. You are qualified by His strength. The enemy wants you to believe that your fall is final. God wants you to know it's just a chapter, and the next one can begin the moment you accept His hand. You don't have to earn your way back into God's grace. You never left it. Grace is not a room you enter and exit based on performance. It is the atmosphere you breathe as a child of the Most High. You may have been knocked down, but in Christ, you rise. You rise not by your own merit, but by His mercy. You rise not because you feel strong, but because His strength is made perfect in your weakness. That is what separates a survivor from a conqueror, knowing that your victory is not based on what you can accomplish, but on what Christ has already secured. When you begin to live from this truth, shame loses its grip, regret loses its voice, fear loses its power. You start to walk with your head high, not in arrogance, but in identity. You are not just a wounded soul trying to heal. You are a warrior being rebuilt. And every time you get up again, you declare to the darkness, "God is not finished with me." You don't have to pretend the fall didn't hurt. You don't have to minimize the failure, but you do need to reframe it. This is not where your story ends. This is where resilience grows. This is where your testimony deepens. This is where someone else watching your courage will find hope to rise as well. You were never meant to be perfect. You were meant to be transformed. And transformation takes time. God is not disappointed in your journey. He's invested in it. He sees not just who you are today, but who you're becoming tomorrow. And every moment you choose to keep going, every time you take one more step forward, He rejoices not because you never fell, but because you refused to stay down. So walk in that truth. Let it shape how you see yourself and how you treat yourself. Speak to your soul with compassion the way God speaks to you. Stand again. Breathe again. Trust again. You are not just alive. You are chosen, redeemed, and deeply loved. That's more than survival. That's victory. And it's yours not by might but by grace. You've come farther than you think. Every battle you've endured, every tear you've prayed through, every step forward in silence, they all point to one truth: you are stronger than you know. The fact that you are still here, still listening, still open to truth, is a testimony in itself. You are not just surviving, you are being strengthened for victory. Hold on to your faith. Keep moving forward. There's a purpose to your process and power in your persistence. You are not defined by your pain, but by the one who carries you through it. God is not finished with you yet. So rise up, keep going, and take heart. You will overcome. The same God who brought you to this moment will walk you into your next. You were made for more than quitting. You were made to endure, to believe, and to win. And now, as we transition from encouragement to communion, I invite you to pray with me. This is the moment to press deeper, to open your heart fully, and to surrender not just your past, but your future. This is the moment to ask for divine direction. Father, I come before you with gratitude. for every soul listening, for every heart that stayed until the end, not out of obligation, but out of longing. These are not just people watching a message. These are sons and daughters, each one searching for more than comfort. They are searching for clarity and confusion, identity in a world that tries to rename them, and divine assignment in the face of so many questions. You see each of them completely. You know every detail. You know the burdens they carry, the thoughts that steal their sleep, and the places where their faith has grown thin. You were present in every silent battle. You caught every tear they were too afraid to let others see. You stood beside them in every moment they felt alone. And today, God, I ask for something more than comfort. I ask for clarity. I ask for revelation. I ask for divine commissioning. Lord, would you guide each listener into their next assignment, not just the next thing on their calendar, but the next move toward their eternal purpose. Align their steps with your timing. Remove every distraction that pulls them off course. Silence every voice that confuses them or leads them away from your will. And place in front of them the very path you've prepared since before they were born. Reveal the mission hidden in their makeup, the calling etched into their design. Let it rise to the surface now unmistakably. Speak clearly, Father. Speak specifically. Open their spiritual eyes and ears to perceive your direction. For the one who feels unworthy, remind them that you are not looking for the impressive, but for the willing. Show them that you have always chosen the unlikely, the overlooked, and the underestimated to carry out your greatest works. For the one who feels too broken, reveal that you are a redeemer who never discards what's cracked, but specializes in rebuilding from pieces others have abandoned. For the one who feels invisible, whisper that they have always been seen, known, and loved, that no detail of their life is wasted, and every moment matters in the tapestry you're weaving. Take their willingness and multiply it into impact. Take their hidden pain and pour purpose through it. Take their uncertainty and shape it into unshakable wisdom. Let them know deep in their spirit that what they've been through is not their disqualification, but their qualification, that their story will not end in silence, but in legacy. I pray for courage now, God, not the kind of courage that waits for confirmation, but the kind that moves in obedience before results appear. Courage to say yes when fear says wait. Courage to step into uncomfortable spaces because you are already there. Courage to believe even when outcomes are unclear. Infuse them with a faith that does not quit when things are quiet, but leans in even more when answers delay. Fill them with holy confidence that what you start, you will finish. Wrap them in your presence like armor. Guard their mind with peace and guard their spirit with purpose. Surround them with voices that speak life and distance them from voices that sow confusion. Go before them in power and make every crooked place straight. Break the chains that have kept them stuck, chains of fear, doubt, and shame. Tear down the lies that have told them it's too late, they're too broken, or they've missed their moment. Breathe new life into their spirit. Restore their energy. Reignite their vision. Wake up the call that's been buried under discouragement and delay. Remind them, Lord, that you are not done. Nothing has been wasted. Not one day, not one tear, not one setback. You are the God who restores years. You are the God who redeems time. So take this moment and make it more than emotional. Make it eternal. Let this be a divine turning point, not a spark that fades, but a fire that leads. Carry them forward with momentum. Let divine fire mark their next step. And may this prayer not only comfort but commission. Let it launch them into the next chapter, written by your hand, carried by your spirit, and lived fully for your glory. This is not the end. It is the beginning of something sacred. May they walk boldly into it. In Jesus' name, amen. If this message spoke to you, If this journey stirred something inside your spirit, then I encourage you to stay connected. Click the like button, not just to show support, but to help someone else discover this message when they need it most. And if you haven't already hit the subscribe button, this is not just a channel, it's a space for spiritual depth, direction, and daily encouragement rooted in truth. When you comment below with 777, you're not just engaging, you're stepping into a community that's learning to grow together in faith, purpose, and impact. We are here to explore what it really means to walk with God through every season of life. So don't just watch, belong, build, and become. Your next chapter starts now, and we're honored to walk it with you.